Welcome back to the next presentation. I'm happy to have here Gerardo's teammate, Yannick from B310, explaining us on how to rewrite open source projects.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Last year my colleague and friend Gerardo was actually talking about contributing to GitLab. Now we have a kind of a different topic, renewal of open source software, why, when, and how to rewrite. But first, before we start, let's get on the same page. So what is a rewrite actually? What am I talking about? So when I was thinking about metaphors, like what is rewriting in the real world, as I'm from Germany, we always think about infrastructure examples, right? So train stations or whatever. And I was thinking about the new airport in Berlin. So it was basically directly built next to an existing airport. But yeah, nowadays, most of it is completely brand new, right? So this is maybe an example for a rewrite in the real world. So what is a rewrite? Replacing most of a legacy system, and following a potential grace period, the system or the old code base will be then retired. So I think it's in contrast to refactoring, where we try to incrementally improve slowly the code base essentially. So I know it's kind of early in the morning, but maybe we can do a short poll. So who has created a rewrite in any form? Hands up. Okay, quite a few. Cool. So yes, I want to start the talk actually with a kind of provocative statement by Joel Spolsky. So I will read it out. The single worst strategic mistake that any software company can make, they decided to rewrite the code from scratch. So Joel Spolsky is actually one of the co-founders of Stack Overflow. He also has written this little tool called Trello. And he is also writing on a blog called Joel on Software. So during this presentation, I want to give you the context, why he said that, and the context of the quote. And we will dig into possible reasons why it might be still completely valid to think about rewriting something. Before we do that, I asked myself the question, like, is there actually a difference between rewriting open source software or closed source software? Because I think in software engineering, this is a kind of a common topic. So I think there are a few differences, right? So for instance, we have this issue with maintainers, right? So maintainers might just suddenly leave and you just don't know that they actually have left. So you have to observe the project, right? Of course, depends on the scale and the complexity of the project. If there are a lot of maintainers, that might not be a problem, but there are also a lot of projects where there is just one single maintainer actually available. And I think in most cases, open source projects might be even still more complicated in regards to project management. So we have more opinions, more stakeholders, and maybe there's also not this single instance who's actually calling the shots. So like finding a solution or the decision might be more complicated. Yeah, I have brought a little case study, and to understand this case study, I will talk briefly about us, what we do despite of GitLab open source contributions. So what we also do is we maintain and host a couple of open source app for a state institute in Lower Saxony. So these applications are not big per se, but we have a couple of them, like roughly 9, and they all have different origins, right? So some are like forks of other projects, some are originals, so it's like a wide mix of different stuff and different applications. So just 2 examples here. So on the left, you can see a T-Mapper, which is basically a mind mapping application with collaboration built on top of it. It's actually a continuation of an older app called Mind Map, where we exactly had this problem that the maintainer actually just discontinued the project. And so we continued and added collaboration on top of it. And on the right, you can see Excalibur. You might have also heard of that. It's a drawing application essentially, and we are hosting a fork of it. And we excluded Firebase from the code base due to data protection reasons. So in this presentation, the case study will be actually about Etherpad. You can see it on the right. You also might have heard of it. It's basically a collaborative text editing tool, kind of easy to use. And a little bit about the history. In 2008, it was actually first released. It was also roughly around that time where Google Wave, you might also know that, was also launched, like a collaboration web tool to work together. And yeah, but after the release, roughly a year after that, it was actually acquired by Google, and then Google open sourced the project. And 2 years later, it was actually rewritten in JavaScript and with Node.js. So during this presentation, when I'm referring to Etherpad, I mean Etherpad Lite, because I think that's nowadays the most popular derivative of Etherpad. So let's finally come to the why would you at all think about rewriting something. And I think we already kind of scratched the first point, right? So there are a lot of open source projects out there that are simply unmaintained. And why is this a problem? Well, if you have an unmaintained project, you need to read a lot of code, and you don't necessarily have anyone still there that you can ask questions, right? So then you have to understand a lot of code, and that takes a lot of time. So it might be even harder than to actually rewrite or to write code. So for first learning here, if you have something that is unmaintained, of course, make it obvious, right? So archive the project. This is an example of GitHub. Archive the project, add something to the README. So for other people, to make it really obvious that this is not maintained anymore. But if you are planning to build on something that is unmaintained, you can still contact the maintainer, right? So this MindMap project is actually the project where team members built on top of it. And I contacted the guy, and he then, added something to the README. So he actually linked my project. I linked him back. So I think it's a win-win situation, because you're getting more users. And the new project is actually, you also give contribution to, or like a reference to the old project. So also he has the feeling that, his old project is actually continuing and developing. So I think that's also nice. In our case study, Etherpad there was a critical time period where it was actually kind of unmaintained. But miraculously from 2018, I'm not exactly sure why, but somehow it was kind of reanimated. And then we also later actually also contributed to the project. So maintenance, active maintenance would not be a reason why you would want to rewrite Etherpad. Another reason are diverging project goals. So if you're using an application like an open source application, and there are new features, and you don't want to have these features, then it might be more work to always deactivate or throw out all these features than that you actually gain with these new improvements. And also there might be problems with unstable releases. Everything is breaking for a new release. Or you have issues with backward compatibility. Yeah, so of course, before you start rewriting something, first think about just joining the project, right? So maybe you can steer it in a certain direction, or if that does not work for you, then of course you can still think about forking. So in this example, we have Spree Commerce, which is or still is a popular Ruby on Rails e-commerce framework. There were a couple of companies unhappy how backwards compatibility, for instance, was handled, and also the sponsor was leaving. So they actually forked it. We also just had discussions at the bar, right? That sometimes maybe features are actually removed from existing open source software. So you also might think about forking an older version of it, but then of course you have to bring the manpower to actually continue the work on it. And then there are of course also questions like how close are you to the main branch? Are you completely going some other place, right, with your thing, so you're not compatible anymore, or do you try to stay very close to the main branch so you can also include updates and so forth? Yeah, forking can be great. But it can also be very complex, right? So this is not a map of a metro system of some European city. These are just Star Wars derivatives. So it can get very complex, right? So if you're forking, just think about your users, and that they might get confused with all the different forks and names. And I think they don't have to care, because they just want to use software that helps within their lives. So just think about that it can be complicated from the outside world, especially with people who are not developers. Yes, in our Etherpad project, at first we of course started with a fork. We did some changes there, but was a fork that was very close to the original. We actually joined the effort, so we also provided Docker fixes and so forth, because we had issues there. We added actually new functionality with the plugin mechanism for Etherpad. For instance, we wanted to remove, because we have a public instance, we wanted to remove old pads like after a year or so due to data protection reasons. And yeah, but it was more and more work was required to actually remove certain features. I mean, some features are obvious in the beginning, right? There's this chat that Etherpad has. I think it's not really necessary anymore, but there are also like new features coming out that we didn't really want to have. Another reason might be refactoring and modernization. There are new technologies that maybe make part of the old project completely obsolete, right? I don't know, new framework that makes concurrency like way easier to use or whatever. And there, of course, also might be just changing best practices, a lot of dead code, bad code, or whatever. I think AI can now really help here, but still it might be an issue where you are thinking about a rewrite. And then, of course, we have this special point like license in comparison to closed source. So you might have just license issues, right? You're not allowed to actually use the code in the way that you want to use it. So this might also be a problem here. So in our case study, there are definitely ongoing efforts in the Etherpad code base to actually improve the technology there. They changed from NPM to PNPM. We have added Docker. They also changed to TypeScript. That's a lot of work, right? TypeScript is not about just changing file names with the TS. It's not about it. Because that is the way it started. It's also fine, but it's a lot of work to actually do it in a good way. But there's still a lot of unmaintained and undocumented code, and like links in the README are broken. There's some legacy code that nobody really understands, and this is still like a problem here. So one other big area I think is performance, scalability, and security. So you might have like just big performance issues, like your app crashes. You can't scale it anymore. You have to throw more and more hardware actually on it. So these might also be reasons why you're thinking about rewriting something. And if you're planning to do that, of course, this should be aligned with your business goals, right? Only because there's a new awesome framework that makes everything faster and more scalable, you shouldn't just rewrite it in that fashion. It should be aligned with your business goals. Then, of course, if you have crashes, you need to debug those, right? So, and this can also be, in some applications, quite complicated. So I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but this is also interesting news, right? So the TypeScript compiler, there's a new preview, I think, was just released, and they claim that it's actually 10 times faster. Now you can think, like, how do you manage to do something 10 times faster without rewriting it? And they are claiming that they are actually port the whole code base from JavaScript and TypeScript to the Go language. This is what it makes 10 times faster. So they are talking a lot about that it's not a rewrite, but a port, because they essentially just copy-pasted. That's what they say, right? I'm not aware of any details internally, but they just copy-pasted all these functions to the Go language directly. So in a sense, they only changed the platform that was lying beneath it, and the code basically stayed the same. So they gained a 10-time improvement. So it's, I think, really cool news, and also an interesting example how you can solve performance issues without rewriting everything. Yeah, in our case study with Etherpad, this was really where we had a lot of problems, right? So we had very poor performance, crashes. We had to throw more hardware and more hardware onto it, and we had a couple of security concerns. So, for instance, there's this admin area that we had to deactivate because we have a public instance, and also the plugin mechanism. Etherpad is kind of scary because it's essentially searches through the packages with a certain namespace regular expression, and also they have had binary file import, which we deactivated. So there were also a lot of security concerns. Yeah, and it was also like these crashes were kind of hard to debug in this bigger code base. So after having talked and clarified the why, let's talk about the when. So I think the first thing is you should always, before you start, you should of course do a reality check, get in touch with the maintainers, right? So maybe they're just missing sponsoring. So they have the issues, like they also know about the issues, they want to fix it, but they don't have time to actually to start there. So maybe just sponsoring helps or just some help. And if that does not work out, you of course can still search for project alternatives that you still can simply use. So in Etherpad, we didn't find any really, for us at least like during the time of research, we didn't find any alternatives that made sense for us. But we contacted the people, they were also had a friendly chat, right? But we also realized we have different scopes in mind. And talking about rewriting, of course, they liked the idea, but then they wanted to basically have everything that they have now, and they are still continuing working and adding new features. And I would have been, I would have been running all the time behind them, trying to add everything back. So this was not really like how we imagined it to work out. Then, of course, right, feasibility, how complex is the project? I'm not sure if it's even possible to, rewrite GitLab, for instance. It's a very big project. You need, of course, a lot of manpower to do it, so you should be realistic about that. And, of course, there's the existing user base, right? So you don't want to lose them if you completely change the database schema, whatever, or simply the name. You might be in danger to actually lose your user base, and, of course, that's like the worst thing that can happen. So here I want to go back to the quote from the beginning, because as we have seen, rewriting is kind of a controversial topic, and in some cases it's a very bad idea. So the quote was actually given in this context. So Netscape released their version 4 in June 1997, and then they started actually with a new version that they want to release. But along the way, they realized, all the code is shit, and we can't work with it, and it's too slow, and yeah, let's just scrap that. We will start from scratch. And they did that, and the new version then actually came out 3 years later, right? If you take the version 4, so in November 2000. So it took them a long time to actually rewrite everything like they planned. To rewrite it from scratch. And during this time, of course, the old, or like the version before, it was actually, there was kind of a feature freeze, right? So yeah, the company was stuck in this strategic decision. So this is can really be dangerous if you are locking your old product and rewriting everything. Everyone is working on it, and yeah, this can be very dangerous. And this is why the quote was actually given. Yeah, in our Etherpad example, rewriting a real-time text merging algorithm or whatever wasn't really in time and budget. But we realized, of course, there are new libraries available that can really shorten the process of writing something like this. So the how. So the first thing I think is scope management. So I don't know, maybe you've helped once in your life somebody else moving places, right? And I remember these situations where you're in the cellar, right? There's a broken chair and you're like, man, do you really need to move this broken chair to your next flat? You could have just thrown that away before. So moving places is easier. And I think the same attitude can be brought also to scope management, right? So if you're thinking now really about rewriting something, maybe you can think about what to throw away of the scope, right? So you should be clear about your objectives and goals. And maybe throw away a bit of requirements that you're sure that nobody really needs anymore. So you can lessen the amount of work already here. So I think that's important. So for Etherpad, I mean, this is not a really big and complex application, but we have a very good idea, I think, about the scope, because we already added new functionality with plugins. We also removed certain functionalities, so we were pretty sure what we wanted to have. So that was quite easy here, but I'm aware that there are way more complex projects, and then it can become very difficult to actually decide what to take away and what should remain. So then, of course, do research, what is available, other new technologies that you can use. And in our case, we actually found this kind of new library, YJS. It's a library for synchronizing data structures. For instance, text, but you can also basically synchronize objects over a network, and it's based on conflict-free replicated data types. I can't really dig more into this topic, but I think it's worth an own presentation. But we can, of course, check later on the bar about that, because I think it's really interesting. Then we also realized that there's a prose mirror editor and TipTap editor. So the TipTap editor is actually based on the prose mirror editor and is also a company. So this is basically the front end that you can use for writing your text And then there's the Hocus Pocus server, also by this company, also all open source, and which serves as a backend for this YJS basically library. Yeah, and in the end, you simply have to rewire existing open source tools to achieve the same thing. So that is basically what we realized. But of course, there might be way more complex projects, right, where it's not that easy to just find some existing libraries that maybe solve what you wanted to have. And yeah, so there are also a lot of best practices available how you do it. So Martin Fowler, for instance, has written very extensively about this topic. So of course, first break up the problem in smaller parts, right? So maybe this legacy system already has a couple of components that you can rewrite one after another. And if not, maybe you have to think about actually first how to break up this legacy application into smaller parts that you can then rewrite. He also kind of accidentally coined the term of the Strangler fig. This is basically a plant that is growing around another tree, taking nutrients from this tree, and it's growing around it until it's actually strangles it to death. So you can use this metaphor for rewriting. So you're basically replacing module or component after component until actually the whole application the old application is basically gone. Then there's, of course, also like patterns that you can use, like transitional architecture, which would be like a metaphor in the real world, would be a scaffold, built around a building and that you can use, and is only used for the time that you're actually moving from the one system to the next one. So there's a lot of like best practices that you can actually use. So yeah, again, in essence, rewrite is very expensive, right? It can take a long time. There might be also undocumented requirements because the people that actually have written the software are already gone. And yeah, feature freezes are probably not the best way how to do it. After having talked a lot about our case study, I want to briefly just show you what we have built. So these our personal Etherpad rewrite that we are now hosting. So it's essentially a very small, application where you can collaboratively, write text, add comments, and also like upload encrypted images to an S3 compatible backend. So it's a small application, but completely works like in our case for this institute because they are in the education sector, and there are classes that are using these tools so that kids can write text basically together. So yeah, it's in all essence, it's a rewrite, but it's not a rewrite from scratch, right? Because we use a lot of libraries. We basically rewired all these libraries to serve our needs. We also added like these new features like comments and encrypted image uploads. And this comments feature is also now open sourced TipTap plugin. So if you want to build anything like it, so you can also use that. But of course, there's like also the sad part because we did not invest the time that we invested for the rewrite. We could have also, of course, invested in the Etherpad community, and then we would have served way more users with these fixes or maybe fixing of these broken issues. Maybe some alternatives. So there's also Numeric, which is actually sponsored, I think, by the French government. So it's now they also have a collaboration going on with Zendis, who are in Germany providing open source tools for the administrative area. And there's a Hedgehog, which is actually a Markdown-based editor that's also collaboratively usable. So also two similar projects, and they're also based on YJS actually. So I want to end with a quote from Joe Spolsky, a little bit food for thought. We are programmers. Programmers are, in their hearts, architects, and the first thing they want to do when they get to a site is to bulldoze that place flat and build something grand. So I think before you're planning to rewrite something, right, it should be your final option, your last option. Before that, think about if it's actually a good idea, and if you do it, think about the scope and use best practices in software engineering to hopefully get it well done. So thank you. I think we have a few minutes left, so if there are questions.
So you said you were in contact with the maintainers before the rewrite. Are you now still in contact with the maintainers, and how's their reaction, or what's the reaction of the user base of the other project?
Yeah, I mean, we're not stealing their user base, so they are basically completely continuing their thing. So, and I was in contact actually before we started the rewrite, because my aim, my goal was actually to stay in the Etherpad basically community, because I know there are a lot of instances out there that are actually using Etherpad. So that was my goal. But yeah, somehow it did not turn out, and I was also a little bit sad about that, because that was all the time my main goal. Our project now is basically just used by us, right? So it's open source, so everybody can use it. But I also realized, just putting something there for free, nobody will necessarily be there, right? So you still have to do marketing and so forth. So otherwise, your project will just be just sitting there helping yourself, right? It's fine. But yeah, will be not necessarily very popular or whatever. And I think that's currently the case. So I mean, we are using this tool now for this state institute, and also there are a lot of users. But we are basically, I guess, the only ones who are using it now. But yeah, it would be cooler to have added all this functionality to Etherpad. Yeah.